So recently, by the grace of the algorithm alone, I came across a young content producer, a young artist who is making content on this very same platform of YouTube.com. His name is Jreg, or Jreg maybe, I don't actually know. But he makes like very ironic, very heavily edited videos, comedy videos, very much like Zoomer content, I think. But you know, his content is pretty funny. Like, I haven't watched too much of it, but and I don't want to like say too much about irony right now. There's a lot to be said about it. But just from like the little bit that of the stuff that I have watched, I noticed that it seems to be a concern for him, like his vulnerability to the kinds of platforms that he's become very financially dependent on as an artist. So he's got like a couple 100,000 subscribers, so he's definitely making some ad money from YouTube. But he also has like a Patreon where he's making over $2,000 a month, which is, you know, enough to buy you a decent lifestyle here in Canada. Shout out to a fellow Canadian. And like, great, that's all really good for him. Congratulations. I'm really glad to see success on that scale, but it's interesting that he himself knows that like he's producing this very like political, edgy content where he's celebrating extremism of all sorts, including, you know, well, whatever, I won't get into it, but like, he knows how vulnerable it is. He knows how that his channel could be shut down at any minute, and, you know, there goes his livelihood, and to one extent or another, there goes his audience. He is completely dependent upon this private platform, which is, you know, generating surplus off of his content, but also has no like cultural basis, no commitment to him really, no real reason to see him as an artist, to even like consider an appeal if they were to shut him down. So I think that he like fits in pretty well into a kind of argument that I've been trying to construct on this channel, which is that artists and intellectuals and really any independent individual who is producing anything of any sort on the internet really need to be very mindful of how they relate to these kinds of platforms and how dependent they are on them, because, you know, like, there are many different ways to talk about it. What I think is interesting to point out, first of all, which is not really related to this argument, is how like the form of the content that he is producing, these short little videos, arose out of the material construct of the platform that he was going to put them on. So like, just it's interesting to notice that like this form of art, this art form emerges on the basis of like material developments in social relations. But the other point to make is that like there have been people, like, I think that young American kid who, I think his name is like Alex Ross, maybe, I have no idea who that is, but there's this like kind of like edgy right-wing, well, like in between neo-reactionary, maybe you can call him, but he is like famous for having like come up with like 3D printed models for guns. So like anybody can like print a gun out of like a, you know, relatively inexpensive 3D printer. I'm pretty sure that he got like banned by Visa, or like shut down by Visa. So like there's so many different levels at which one can be like shut down by the man and inhibited in making this kind of like edgy content, this kind of like no holds barred kind of art that we actually, I think, really need and it's really like the function of art. The art world itself is so institutionalized that it is not really capable of delivering the kinds of like social critiques that art is really all about. But then like independent art, on the other hand, on the internet, which is like a thriving domain for art, it is itself so reliant upon these like tech companies. So anyway, Jreg, like he has his audience on YouTube and he's getting YouTube dollars. He could get banned from YouTube and then that's gone. He could potentially like you do like a PeerTube instance. PeerTube is like a kind of like peer-to-peer style video hosting thing where you can like host it on your own server and then people who view it like share like little bits of the video. It's the same principle as a BitTorrent basically, but it's a way to get around the like technical hurdle of hosting video files, which are large files, to like audiences of potentially hundreds of thousands of people, which requires like a tremendous amount of bandwidth. So obviously, in order to like meet that kind of demand, you'd still need like a pretty sizable server. But on the income that Jreg is making, he could afford for that. He could put that in. He could put the capital into that, make that kind of investment. It wouldn't be too much like it wouldn't like really break his bank open. But then like he could get banned from Patreon, and then there are other like alternatives to Patreon. But then you could get banned from like Visa. So like our dependency on these kinds of corporations is really alarming when you think about it. At the stage of getting banned from Visa, like you can go to Bitcoin, but like the further away from the centers of power, away from like these major platforms like YouTube, just the further away you're getting from these kinds of like major networks, like the more niche you're getting and the smaller your audience is getting. At least it is if you, and also like what's really crucial about these kinds of platforms like YouTube is audience generation. So like a YouTube channel that has a bunch of subscribers and is regularly putting out content is obviously going to be getting more and more subscribers over time, hopefully building up for subscribers that you might be losing. And like if you were to like from the outset be mindful of this and try to construct your practice as an artist or an intellectual or whatever, as a content producer, in such a way that you retain some independence from these kinds of massive corporations, then I think that if you were to face retaliation further down the line, then if you have already like built up a kind of like independent network where you have like a core audience who is still invested in you and who is still going to follow you even to like the most niche domain of like having a Bitcoin funded like Patreon style thing, like a Bitcoin subscription model where like you pay Bitcoin in order to get exclusive content. Like that's a very niche thing, and like a lot of people are going to be weeded out, and like your massive audience of like hundreds of thousands of people is going to diminish to however many. But I think that if you like build that kind of structure into your enterprise from the outset, then that is going to be less of a problem for you down the line, and you're going to face you're going to be less at risk from these giant corporations. And of course, like building those kinds of like contingency plans requires some technical knowledge. Like it requires some commitment to things that are not directly related to the art, and which might seem foolish at the beginning, and which might to some extent inhibit the degree to which you're going to be able to get an audience. So like if Jreg were like putting all his videos on his PeerTube instance from the beginning and like sidelining YouTube, then he would never have grown such an audience. But if he were to, at this stage in his career, like kind of start developing these kinds of alternatives to these massive corporations, and like start weaning himself off of and his audience off of depending on them, then I think, you know, like that would only yield positive results for him. Yeah, so I guess that's all I will say for this video. I just think that it's very important for artists, for content producers to, you know, be mindful of the way that the internet has become completely corporatized, has become completely monopolized by like just a few different corporations, and how they are in fact like the enemy of the people, and you know, they're going to crack down on you sooner or later. And I think that it is just a good idea for people to, you know, invest in like a minimal degree of technical knowledge in order to be able to build their audience, build like a means of communicating with your audience that is not dependent on some platform that you could potentially get banned from, and which you're going to be censoring yourself on in order to avoid getting banned from. And you know, there's another question of like the form that you're engaging in. Like Jreg is making these videos that are very unique to the form of YouTube. Like if YouTube had not existed, then would he have like become an artist in a sense? And you know, does YouTube really just create like a new artistic formal possibility that, you know, is not really able in the artist's interest to get to like put all of their practice in? Just a few thoughts. See you next time.